We'll see how long Negan's going to be around for. I mean, you know, in the comic books, he's still alive and kicking. And in the show, I want to say we're like at 104, 105, something like that. So you can see now, if we do that math, that technically Negan would be around for at least another 4 years if the show were to go that long. Yeah.
I got to let you go.
Half of you are like, oh, no. How many more monologues do I gotta hear this guy say?
Negan isn't going anywhere anytime soon. I know there are a lot of people who don't like him because he's practically a 10-year-old boy with a killer baseball bat, but there are people like me who followed him since the comics and love the depth to his character, so much so that we're willing to buy memorabilia. But I want to convince you, not only on why Negan will live past multiple seasons, but why he's a good character, considering I've never made a video on The Walking Dead and I've kind of collected almost every issue. So to put it simply, Morgan's got a contract that's spanning multiple seasons, so you know he's going to be around. They've hinted at storylines for the character that are going to go way past season 8, and even the showrunners have hinted that this big upcoming war between Rick and Negan isn't going to be won by either but the zombies, who I think used to play a big part in the show. Now, for those who haven't read the comics, you've had 8 seasons, so I'm assuming you don't really care for them, but if you are catching up on them, here's a quick spoiler warning for the comics, and in case what I'm about to say gets adapted for TV, then the TV show as well, as I try to explain why Negan will live, why he's dope. As Morgan said, they are planning to have a flashback episode for Negan, and there just so happens to be a comic mini-series about him titled, Here's Negan. In it, we learn he's a gym teacher and a ping pong coach. He's always had colorful language, and he's cheating on his wife, but stops when he learns she has cancer. Just like Rick, the outbreak just so happens to happen when they're in the hospital, and Negan has no choice but to leave her to die. His wife's name was Lucille. The rest of the prequel covers how a lot, and I mean a lot of people die around him, how he finds the bat, his jacket, and when he makes his first kill in order to create the saviors since he got sick and tired of the weak people around him dying. That's the day he not only creates Lucille as his savior, but he even becomes and names himself the leader of his own group known as the Saviors. He's definitely a character that's very loud and demanding, especially if you watch the uncut episodes where they don't censor him. And that stems from Robert Kirkman's name for him, which he originally had, where he wanted it to be something negative. At first, what he had in mind was the name Nagas, but that ended up being a dude from Star Trek, so he settled on Negan. And while he may seem heartless, I think the comics set up a lot more depth to his character. He does have a weakness, and like Ezekiel, most of the theatrics that he shows are just to put up a front and to hide the fact that he is scared.
They needed someone to follow, so I acted the part. I faked it till I made it.
He does it to hide his emotions after seeing so many die in front of him. Now, most of you know how things go. He ends up building up his colony, he burns the faces of whoever gets out of line and bashes the faces of whoever breaks that line, and as we see, he eventually meets up with Rick's group. Now, Season 8 is meant to cover the all-out war storyline where they have an all-out war, and by the end of it, obviously Rick wins, but Negan doesn't die. Instead, he becomes the first prisoner in the jail they set up. I think this would work great for the TV show because once they jail him, they don't have to worry about continuously showing him or really extending his contract because they can have storylines without him since he's in jail. More than that, the idea of a prisoner breaks that dull cycle we've been seeing not only in The Walking Dead, but in so many shows where a new villain appears every other season, where Rick ends up killing every other bad guy and we just keep moving on to the next one. In fact, it adds to Rick's character by proving that this new society of rules that he's trying to build can actually change a person. You see, the next villain that we get after Leather Shazam here is a group of talking zombies known as the Whisperers, except they're not really talking zombies, but psychos wearing zombie skin. They're probably the biggest threat that they would have had so far because they're able to blend in with the walkers and move them around, and even when people get close to them and they try doing that little fencing thing that they do in slow-mo, these guys can just come out and legit just shank one of the main cast members. At a certain point, they'll eventually be in battle with them, and that's when Negan is able to get set free by some kid who hates Rick for whatever reason, and of course, Negan ends up killing this kid. He ends up with the Whisperers, and as they plan to attack Rickville, wouldn't you know it, Negan gets ahead of the game and brings Papa Grimes a gift by killing their main leader, named Alpha. Now, of course, no one is going to believe that Negan truly changed, but he does get multiple chances to leave, and he doesn't. And he gets multiple chances to do something bad, and he doesn't. In fact, he eventually gets back Lucille, who gets demolished, and we get to see him at his weakest point. I mean, the dude literally has a funeral for his bat, which, as you know, the bat is supposed to symbolize his wife and the person who helped him get through all these tough times. Now, I think Negan's character is very interesting and very entertaining, and it's not to say that Morgan is bad, because I do like him, even though Patrick Warburton would have been perfect. It's just that I don't like how the show has handled him. I mean, how they've handled any of their villains. Take, for example, the Governor, a dude who was insanely menacing in the comics, and he became a staple for me because of two big actions he committed: cutting off Rick's hand and killing Lori while holding Judith. They took both of those moments away from him. Now, I get that the budget and the effects for the hand would have been a hassle, and I'll accept Lori's TV death only because it gave us this great meme, but it still stands that the TV Governor was definitely a lot more watered down. Even my favorite line in the entire comic series, which, again, my girlfriend got me this, but in the comics, it was this incredible proclamation that in the TV show became this.
We tell ourselves that we are the Walking Dead.
So now, take Negan, who in the comics was an abrupt force that came crashing out of nowhere into issue 100, was defined by his language, and literally made his mark. The TV show obviously has no language when they air it, but teasing him since season 5 did the complete opposite of how they introduced him in the comics, because they completely stretched him out. And then they had that season 6 cliffhanger. Now, for those who think I'm completely hating on the show, obviously you didn't watch this entire video before leaving your comment. I'm an avid viewer of the show. Even though I will always say that I love the comics a lot more, I really enjoy watching the series, and have so for practically 8 seasons so far. And the thing is, I want it to be good. Even with all of its filler, I do think it has genuinely great moments scattered throughout, and I'm not one of those who dislikes aspects of the show and then is automatically gonna toss it all out and say it's a 0 out of 10. I want it to be good, and I just wish it focused more on the story instead of trying to cut back budgets and stretch seasons to make more money. I wish it would bring it back to that season 1 10 episode set, to cut back the filler and do what many other series who have that 10 episode set are able to do, be able to have the perfect pacing to tell a season worthy story. I'm not even one to bash spin-offs or 20 plus seasons, do all of that if you want, if you have something worthy to tell. And the Walking Dead universe has that. You see, there's a whole backstory for the Governor that was geniusly told in this novel, where you follow Philip Blake, his daughter Penny, and his brother Brian throughout the outbreak. Not only does Penny die, of course, by the end of it, but then, as a twist, Philip dies himself, because the big reveal at the end of the story is that Brian, his brother, ends up taking his identity to eventually become the Governor. There's also a one-off from Saga author Brian K. Vaughan, who's fantastic, who covers the outbreak in Spain and follows an American boy who ends up helping a woman escape. Since it's a single issue, of course he ends up dying by the end of it, but not before telling the woman who's going back to the States to send a message to his brother Rick. In other words, there's a vast amount of stories that a successful franchise like The Walking Dead can and is able to tell. They even announced a crossover between Fear the Walking Dead and the main show, and honestly, I hope they follow through with the theory that's out there of Madison, one of the main characters from Fear, becoming more aggressive to the point of becoming Alpha, the leader of the Whisperers, when that storyline finally comes up in the main series. Either way, AMC can choose to get rid of Negan. They can omit one of the best storylines of redemption that this show has to offer and go the route of fan service and filler as they stretch out their seasons. But if they choose to kill Negan instead of fixing him, then that would be exactly what they're doing to their own show.